Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of Sheboygan County, the Sheboygan County Democratic Party's Candid with Candidates series. Today, we are excited to introduce one of our gubernatorial candidates, and Missy Hughes. Come on up and take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Leah. I really appreciate it. So glad to be here today and be back in Sheboygan. I was just reminded that the last time I was here was, I know it was January 17th, because that was my mother's birthday, and so with tomorrow as Mother's Day, it's a sweet circling around of honoring someone who is incredibly, incredibly important in my life. So I'm Missy Hughes, and I'm running for governor. I live down in the southwest part of the state, in Viroqua, and I've lived there and raised my 3 children. This is my son, Harry. Also fun for a mother to be able to travel around the state with her son. Harry's joined my campaign. And I have 2 other children. Harry has a twin sister and then a younger brother. And my husband still is living and working in southwestern Wisconsin. We've been married for over 30 years. He's the one who's in charge of remembering how many years it is. I'm the one who's in charge of remembering it's May 21st. So coming up here in a couple of weeks, and then I'll remember how many years it was. But I've lived in Wisconsin and worked for Wisconsin families, supporting Wisconsin families for most of my career. I worked for Organic Valley, which is a farmer-owned dairy cooperative based in southwestern Wisconsin, but with farmers all around Wisconsin and all around the country. And my job at Organic Valley was to work with the executive team and make sure that we were helping farmers stay on their farms and pass them on to the next generation. In an incredibly, incredibly difficult time for farmers, it was so important to have a company like Organic Valley, formed by the farmers, created and governed by the farmers, to be able to help small farmers all across the country stay on their farms. And we fought big ag, we fought against consolidation, we fought the USDA every day to help farmers, and we made sure all the way from the farm to the consumer's table that we had the very, very best product so that farmers could receive a sustainable pay price and stay on their farms. I sat across the table from many farmers who talked to me about how they were fearful of losing their farms, they were facing bankruptcy, and then I had the incredible privilege of standing in their driveway on the first day that the Organic Valley truck showed up, and they would turn to me and they would say, "Missy, my farm is saved because of Organic Valley." And so it was an honor to work for the farmers, and I loved my job. But about 6 years ago, Governor Evers came and asked if I would run economic development for the state. And I was thrilled with the opportunity to take my knowledge about rural communities and dairy and agriculture and manufacturing and bring that knowledge and service to the state. The very first day, though, when I showed up for my job, they handed me a big binder, and they said, "Now you have to clean up Foxconn." And I had to open this binder and learn everything I could about the sweetheart deal that Scott Walker and Donald Trump had given to this company that was on the other side of the world, a Chinese company, and we had to make sure that we cleaned up that mess. And ultimately, I saved the taxpayers of Wisconsin over $2.5 billion and cleaned up that mess, and I'm the only candidate in the race who has really had to dug in and clean up Donald Trump's messes. And I tell you, it's not easy, but it is possible, and when you need to have somebody who knows how to roll up her sleeves and get to work on cleaning up these messes, and that's what I would do as governor. And then about 5 months after I started in my role at economic development, COVID hit. And my kids turned to me and said, "Mom, I thought you were in charge of the economy." I was like, okay, well, here we go. So again, we rolled up our sleeves and helped especially small businesses all around the state. If you remember that time, we saw hair salons closing, coffee shops closing, any place where you had a few people convening, we needed to be safe, and they had to shut their doors for a period of time. But then we worked relentlessly with them as they reopened, helping them to innovate, thinking about curbside delivery and tents on sidewalks and all of the different things that we needed to do and get resources to them to help do that. And with Governor Evers' help, WEDC was the #1, helped Wisconsin be the #1 state in the country for getting dollars to our small businesses and for economic development. That was incredibly important to Governor Evers, and I took his lead in making sure that we were protecting our main streets and thinking about how do we come out of this on the strongest foot forward as a state. I continued to do that work for 6 years, traveling all around the state, in meeting with communities, helping with projects, helping businesses come here. And then about a year ago, or whenever it was, a year and a half ago, when Donald Trump was elected, I saw him really start to devastate and undo a lot of the work that we had started and we're working on. He took away funding that we were going to be able to use to help with renewable energy, to build more projects in the state, to help our companies and our businesses become more efficient and more productive, to help our healthcare system and to help our communities really move forward. I saw all of that work being torn apart. And so when Governor Evers decided not to run, I threw my hat in the ring because I believe that my skills, again, are something that will help serve the state. Understanding how the economy works, having worked in dairy and agriculture and manufacturing, understanding economic development and how our communities need to work together. I understand that in order to build a strong economy, we need a healthcare system that works, and we need to fully fund our public schools so that they will educate our children and our children will come out on their strongest foot forward. It's always about moving forward. It's always about that motto that we have. One of the founding farmers of Organic Valley would always say, you're either moving forward or you're moving backward. You can't stand still. And so we have to move forward, especially in light of what we're seeing happen in our country today, the challenges that are being thrown at us by Washington. We need to be on our strongest foot and moving forward so that when 2028 comes around, when we have the opportunity to have a sane federal government again, we will take that opportunity and we will all be able to rebuild what's been destroyed. We will all be able to move forward together. So I'm thrilled to be able to meet you all today, to chat with you about whatever questions you have, and if you want to find out more information about me, you can go to missyforgovernor.com. I do have my signature pages here. Everyone is collecting their signatures in order to be on the ballot, and I would love if you would consider signing my pages so that we can continue that work and keep going around the state and meeting everyone. So thank you so much for your time today. I know it's a beautiful day, and I'm so glad that you spent a little time with me. You guys have any questions? Yeah.
Listen, I just wondered if you could elaborate more on, the Walker Trump fiasco down in what was it, Racine or Kenosha County?
Yeah, Kenosha. In Racine County, Mount Pleasant is the small town where it was. The state invested under Scott Walker and Donald Trump a tremendous amount of money in the infrastructure, in building the highways, in giving the land to Foxconn, in bringing the power to that site. And then when they signed the agreement with Foxconn for Foxconn to get $3 billion worth of tax credits, just rapidly after that, Foxconn said, "Oh yeah, we're not gonna build that," and completely backed out of what they had promised to build, which was a $10 billion facility and create 13,000 jobs. And it became very apparent in the investigation that I was doing that there was never any intention that project was going to move forward. It was always for the photo op and for the businesses and the folks involved to try to make extra dollars on our taxpayer backs, I would say. And so I worked with them to renegotiate the contract that the state had signed. Foxconn is a $270 billion company. So my opinion was always, I'm a lawyer, my opinion was always, if I take them to court, nothing good happens in court. So how can I land this plane and move things forward? And we were able to reach an agreement with Foxconn where they gave up a fair amount of the property and most of the tax credits that they had been promised. And today, Foxconn employs 1,000 people, has good paying jobs there, but it is no longer the sweetheart deal, and it's no longer a shoe that is hanging over Wisconsin waiting to drop. Yeah.
How would you have negotiated that differently? Were you, God forbid, with the Scott Walker administration? How would you have handled that differently up front?
Well, so I did that lots of other times with companies as I was Secretary of Economic Development, with companies that are interested in coming to Wisconsin. I'll give you the example of a company that's actually been in Wisconsin for 50 years, Kikkoman Soy Sauce. So Kikkoman is down in Walworth County. They made an investment in Wisconsin. It was one of the first big investments that Japan made outside of Japan after World War II. And they came to Walworth County, and they had been there for 50 years. They've been a great partner for the state. They had given support to UW-Madison and UW-Milwaukee for research. And they came and they said, Missy, we're thinking about expanding. We think we're going to build a new facility in Ohio or Indiana. And we worked for 15 months to talk with Kikkoman to get them to decide to make that expansion here. And finally, after that time, when we gave them a letter that was signed by all of the Jefferson County commissioners saying, we welcome you to Jefferson County, we would love for you to be here. And Kikkoman made the decision to invest $600 million in Jefferson County and another $250 million in Walworth County, and the state provided a $15 million incentive for that. So if you compare, the amount of crazy incentives that were offered to Foxconn versus really working with a good partner for the state, and that's really how I would approach all of these negotiations, is this company interested in being a partner with the state and being here, supporting our institutions, protecting our environment. There's lots of conversation about data centers, of course. These companies have to be good partners for the state. And if they're not interested in being good partners, then we have to be willing to walk away. And we have to be willing to say, you know what, we don't have to take whatever the cat drags in. We are a great state. People want to be here. They want to have access to our workers and to our cities and communities. Great, then you're going to be a partner, and we're going to find a way forward that protects Wisconsin, and we'll have a long-term relationship. Yeah.
Well, some of the Foxconn land ended up becoming a Microsoft data center, which is about to open now. Okay, we got a deal with them from the state as well. First of all, was it a fair deal? I mean, do we feel that Wisconsin got their fair share out of that deal? And second of all, what is a fair deal for a data center coming into this state? What do we expect from them? What should we be fighting for?
Yeah, so, and I worked closely with Microsoft in their consideration to come here. And, when I compared a company like Foxconn and a company like Microsoft, if you look at Microsoft, they consistently under-promise and over-deliver. They do not make promises the way Foxconn made promises and then walk away. Microsoft is very consistently saying, we are going to deliver what we talk about. And when you think about economic development, that's key. You need to be working with a partner, a company that's going to perform. There were no state incentives for the Microsoft deal. They were able to take advantage of the infrastructure that was built for the Foxconn deal, and so we did not do additional incentives with them. They do receive the sales tax exemption for the data center, but Microsoft came to me, and we had conversations about what can we do to help the state move forward and have you be a good partner. So Microsoft in the southeast of Wisconsin is providing training for workers so that the people that they're employing are coming from the local communities. They located a Center for Innovation at UW-Milwaukee to be able to help our manufacturers adapt and use AI and be able to, and they're really guiding manufacturers to understand how can AI help our businesses. So I consider Microsoft to be a great partner. The CEO of Microsoft, Brad Smith, or the co-CEO, is from Appleton. The person who's in charge of their facilities is from Marshfield. So these are, hometown Wisconsin folks, even though they're based in Washington, who really care about Wisconsin and really want to be partners. When it comes to data centers, it's three main things that we need to be doing. One, we need to make sure that we're protecting the environment. Two, we need to make sure that we're protecting ratepayers. And three, we need to make sure that we're using renewable energy and that any construction that's done, whether it's renewable energy or the facilities, is done by union members. And it's great standing in a labor hall to be able to emphasize that point. I think it's incredibly important to recognize. And Microsoft is using all union labor to build their facility down there, and talking with the union members in that part of the state. They are buying houses. They see long-term incredible benefits from being able to work with a company like Microsoft. So that, I think, is a real experience that is when things work, that's how it should work. As we see other challenges in communities looking at other data centers, I think it's great that communities are getting involved and saying, hang on, we want to know more about this before this happens in our community. But I think having legislation that would do those things that I listed would be great, and I would have loved to have had that as I was secretary, to be able to say, this is what the people of Wisconsin want. I had the DNR in the room with me, I had DOT in the room with me when we were talking to any company that was talking about coming to Wisconsin, but to be able to say, this is how Wisconsinites want to do this, it would be a great kind of thump that on the table, and then, now we can talk. So as soon as we have that trifecta and we can get that legislation passed, we'll be able to have that kind of as table stakes for any conversations we have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Given that your background has been economic development, outside of economic development, what do you see as the most important issue right now in Wisconsin that you would have to tackle outside of economic development?
Yeah, and when I was working in economic development, right, coming from the private sector and dairy and that kind of stuff, I learned a lot. And what I really saw was the underinvestment that we have seen in our state for education really hinders your ability to do more when it comes to economic development. We've also underinvested in things like housing, and so we have to go back to the drawing board a little bit and make sure that we are doing these foundational things like education, which includes, I think, both early childhood, public schools, and then our universities and our tech colleges. That's the full scheme of what has been disinvested in by the Republicans. And by doing the work and going back and supporting that, then you can build the economy, then you can do that work. As I'm talking to companies and saying we have a great education system, but then at the same time having headlines about budget cuts and budget fights and underinvestment, it's hard. We need to go back and have that investment in our education system so that then we can really continue to build our economy, and that's why that's one of my priorities as governor. Yes?
How would you respond to Tiffany's calling himself as a farmer and will be working for one of his big issues, working for farmers?
I think it's completely disingenuous for him to be saying that in the face of standing by while Trump has passed the tariffs, and farmers who live on my road in Viroqua have had to plow under their soybeans because of what they've done, and then the Iran war and the price of diesel and fertilizer having gone through the roof. Like anything he says about that is just completely disingenuous, and he's just saying it because he thinks it's something that people will just hear and not ask more about. And I will definitely challenge him on that, especially for the farmers. I just find it so amazing that he thinks he can get away with that. Not if I can help it. But he is going to present himself as a normal dude, and I'm sure some of you have seen the ad that he has put out that is very persuasive, and so we have to do the work to make sure that we have a candidate who can be elected in November and not have any challenges around that. And I've done work in all 72 counties. I've been throughout the state in all regions as I'm going to places like Sheboygan. I've been here a ton of times as secretary. I helped with a number of different projects on Main Street here and with Johnsonville and Sargento and Saputo in this area. All of this work I'm very, very familiar with, and it's like that again and again across the state. And, you know, I think Tom Tiffany is coming in and he is too radical for the state, but I also think that we need someone who is able to talk to independents, able to talk to farmers, able to talk to union members, and able to bring them to the table and have them voting Democratic in November. And I would be the governor to be able to do that. Yeah.
One question that I have for you, Missy. Today is the day before Mother's Day, and I'm thinking about issues that that are really important to families, specifically childcare affordability. Do you have any specific policies or any thoughts on affordable childcare?
Yes, for sure. And you know, I had 3 under the age of 2, twins, and then a third. And I was a working mom, so I just looked at you. And, you know, childcare was so stressful, but it was stressful just in the terms of finding it and weaving it together. But now families are facing just incredible costs and a lack of childcare, so it's a double problem. And so I presented, and I have a childcare plan that would increase the availability of our Wisconsin Counts programs to more families and cap the cost of childcare at 7% of your income. But the other thing we need to do is we need more childcare teachers and providers, because right now you can go into a childcare in many of our communities and they're only half full. They have capacity for many more children, but because they don't have teachers, we don't have those slots filled up. And you know, the reason we don't have the teachers is that they are underpaid, they can't receive benefits. And so the way I really look at childcare is it is a public good. And it is something that the state needs to invest in and support. And our research shows that for every dollar you invest in childcare, you see $8 back into the economy. And I have now, since then, learned that that's actually a pretty conservative number. And if you think about it, you can get a parent back into the workforce. You can have businesses that have access to more employees so they can keep their shifts going. You can have parents who aren't missing shifts or missing days at work because their childcare falls apart. So all of these ways are places where we can bring dollars back into the economy. You also think about a child who has received really good, quality, consistent childcare, then is prepared to come into our public schools, and our public schools will work better as they have students who are ready for public school. And then finally, you know, if you look at it really in the long term, you think about things like our criminal justice system and doing everything we can to prepare a child, you know, to everything we can from age 0 all the way through to take care of folks so that they can be successful and thrive in Wisconsin. So childcare is incredibly important, but it's those 2 pieces, and we have to do the work to support our childcare workers and then the work to make it more affordable. And so I have proposed investing in childcare to make sure that we do that, and because we see the results back in the economy, I feel like that's a good investment. Yes?
And how will you deal with the federal government trying to cut back on Medicare and on Medicaid in particular?
Well, you know, I think that the challenge is that's a federal issue. We need to rebuild the healthcare system as best we can here in Wisconsin, which includes expanding Badger Care so that anyone in Wisconsin can buy into Badger Care, and that's what I have proposed in my healthcare plan. But we also need to make sure that we're doing what we can to support getting the right delegates and representatives for Wisconsin into the federal government. You know, I think that I've seen the governor kind of not get involved in races. And as governor, I'm going to make sure that every Democrat who's running has my support, and I'm working hard to get them elected, because we need to get more Democrats into Washington and make sure that they are advocating for our rights and not just sitting by and watching things happen.
So also the building of, the governors, working on getting more unity and working together with them and the state's attorney generals.
100%. I think that there's such an opportunity for Democratic governors to work together and start putting solutions forward, particularly I think on healthcare policy, on immigration policy, and on tax policy. If the Congress isn't going to do it, then someone has to start putting solutions forward and start pressing things. I think that there's an opportunity for Democratic governors to say, here's an immigration policy that would work in my state, and without an immigration policy, my economy is really struggling, and my community is very vulnerable. So what can we do to move these things forward? But I think there is a real opportunity for Democratic governors to work together in a much stronger way than we've seen before.
You're likely to still have a Republican legislature after this election. You as governor, how do you work with a Republican to get these kind of issues in place? I mean, you say you as a group of Democratic governors
Yep.
can go ahead and make things happen, but I don't see you doing it the Trump way, which is basically ignoring the legislative branch. How do you work with the legislative branch to make this happen?
Well, I think no matter what, we will see at least a fairer legislature than what Governor Evers had to deal with for the last 8 years. Maybe I think we're confident we'll have a Democratic Senate and a Republican Assembly. I think we will see at least people forced to be a little bit more moderate and working together. But even if we still have hardline Republicans, and we're still going to have some hardline Republicans, right? And they might not be in power, but they're still going to be there. And I will say that over the last 6 years, I worked closely with many Republicans in the legislature. I was unanimously confirmed twice by the Republican Senate. I was the only secretary that was confirmed twice by the Senate. And, if you talk to the Republicans, they would say Missy was someone we could work with, and most importantly, I know they will say she got shit done. And so I think that is really, that's where I then bring them to the table and be like, okay, I've demonstrated that we can make things happen. What are your priorities? These are my priorities. How are we going to work to get these priorities moving forward and represent the people of Wisconsin? No matter what, Wisconsin is a purple state. And so whether the Democrats hold the full trifecta or some portion of it, I believe very strongly that we need to plan for the long-term future. And that means that we need to have policies that people agree with and understand. So we don't have the next team that just comes in and wipes everything away the way Scott Walker did in 2010. We need to show we can govern for the long term and really put us on a path back towards the progressive Wisconsin that we all know and love.
Missy, I haven't heard Tom Tiffany talk about the abortion issue, but I'm just wondering how you might distinguish yourself from him on that particular issue.
Well, 2 years ago, Tom Tiffany co-sponsored the fetal heartbeat bill, which would ban abortion after the presence of a heartbeat, which we all know is just days after conception. And now he denies that. Now he says, oh, I'm a 20-week person. I would work to proactively codify in Wisconsin Roe v. Wade so we can return to the rights that women have had for the past 50 years. And any moment that Tom Tiffany tries to say he's something different than the fetal heartbeat bill advocate, I will remind him that 2 years ago he was a co-sponsor of that and remind everyone that his desire is to take away women's health care and women's choice.
And has he taken a position at all on issues like or the circumstances of rape or where the life of the mother is in danger?
I think that when he says I'm a 20-week person, he has the exceptions in there, but I don't trust anything that he's saying, and I believe that, if someone were to put a fetal heartbeat bill in front of him right now and say, you're the governor, you can sign this, he would absolutely sign it.
think the opportunity is to take back a lot of the Act 10 restrictions that in my local community has really resulted in lack of talent in teachers, lack of opportunity for teachers, teachers being forced out because they just can't make it being a teacher.
Yeah, so I absolutely think we should repeal Act 10, and with a trifecta, we'd be able to do that. I have, having worked for a cooperative for 17 years, a cooperative is really essentially a union. It is people deciding we're going to go to market together and be stronger together, and I believe so deeply that that individuals should have the opportunity to do collective bargaining and to be able to work together. I think we need to really understand, given the 15 years since Act 10, what needs to be rebuilt, what policies do we need to be put in place, and I would, seek input from the unions, both on the public side and the labor side, to say what is it that we want to create for Wisconsin. And the reason that Scott Walker did that was because he said it would help open Wisconsin for business, and that more companies would want to come to Wisconsin. And I can tell you, having been the person in the room talking to companies, there was no company that ever said to me, "Oh, I'm so glad you're a right-to-work state, and I'm so glad that you don't have, protections for unions," because a lot of companies know that their success depends upon working with unions and having unions as part of their workforce. And so I would absolutely support making sure we have protections back in place for collective bargaining.
That and the lack of support for public schools means, in my little community, we are right now paying for 3 referendums.
Yeah.
For as long as I live, we will be paying on a referendum.
Yeah, and we absolutely have to rework how we are paying for public schools, and we can no longer be in a place where at the end of January and the end of June, when folks open their property tax bills, they are mad at our public schools. Like, just the fact that that happens shows that the system is broken and needs to be reworked. And we have communities that just in the spring election did not pass referendums and now are dissolving. Just outside of Madison, there's a school district that is going to dissolve because they weren't able to pass a referendum. And I think the referendums are so divisive for communities.
Yes.
And as I was secretary, talking with communities that had not passed referendums, they were communities in decline. It had really hurt their ability to work together, hurt their ability to see into the future. And, we can't consistently put that on the back of local property taxpayers, because it's just not a long-term way to pay for our public schools.
What is your view on the arrangement of how a non-public school is getting funded with taxpayer dollars?
Yeah, the voucher system that's been built. I've looked into it as a lawyer. I've tried to understand. I try to understand what's happening there. And it's amazing that there are schools that are receiving millions and millions of dollars, of public dollars, with absolutely no accountability. There's an online school that's receiving $50 million more than the next voucher school. And there's no way to know what they're doing with those dollars. There's no authority for Josh Call to go and investigate them. And so we have to put into place accountability for the schools, and that includes both how are those dollars getting spent and how are the students performing. And then we have to make sure that we have transparency, as they've done in Brown County, so that when you open up your property tax bill, you understand what's going to vouchers and what's not, so that people can start to see the impact that this is happening, what is happening in our schools. When I was at WEDC, if we gave a $100,000 grant to a community or a business, they had to have full certified audited financials to be able to receive those dollars. And yet we are just giving millions and millions of dollars to the voucher schools with no accountability. And I would say the only thing though is I don't want to have the voucher fight at the expense of funding public schools. I want to fund public schools, and I want to make sure that our schools are fully funded and that is our priority, because I fear that the voucher fight becomes then a distraction from let's fully fund our public schools and make that happen. And then the vouchers can fight with the roads, and they can fight with all the other things that government spends money on, and we can make the decision that you're not being accountable for your dollars, you're not showing performance, you don't get those funds. But I don't want it to be public schools versus that. I just want a clear mandate, and I'm hearing it all over the state, that we need to fully fund our public schools. Yeah.
Missy, we've done several of these forums, and we have several more to go throughout the months of May and June. As you know, it's a crowded field. I'm wondering, what sets you apart from others in this crowded field?
Yeah, it is a crowded field, and which I just want to say, I think is terrific, because if you look at what's happening on the Republican side, they have all coalesced around Tom Tiffany. He has not been tested on any issues. He doesn't have to answer to anyone. And yet on the Democratic side, we have 7, people who have thrown their hats in the ring and are working their tails off to be able to gain voters' confidence and to carry through. So it's a superpower of the Democratic Party that we have this great group. I would say, even though it is a crowded field, I still really have some characteristics that I find to be compelling that are separate from other folks. First, I'm the only one with significant private sector experience. I'm the only one who's really worked in Wisconsin's economy, in dairy, in agriculture, in manufacturing. I understand what makes this state run in every corner of the state. I'm the only one from outside of Madison or Milwaukee, which, as I talk to folks outside of those cities, we're excited to make sure that the full state is represented for the next governor. I've done a ton of work in Madison and Milwaukee, Kenosha, Green Bay, every city around the state I have worked in, but I think it's important that we have someone who is coming from outside of those urban centers to be able to draw in the rest of the state, to be able to create that coalition to win in November, but then also to be able to govern into the years to come and create that consensus around the policies that we build. And then finally, the last thing is, I've never run for office before. And, I think Wisconsin is really looking for a fresh face that is not about who wins the next election, but who is about how do we govern and how do we make the state successful. And, I don't have any grudges, I don't have any old votes, I just want to move forward and help the state move forward. And folks are just so disheartened with the division and the name calling. My neighbors in Viroqua, I live on a country road. I don't know how they voted. I'm not going to call them names. I'm just going to say, hey, can we have a conversation about how to work in Wisconsin and move Wisconsin forward? And that's the open conversation I can have with folks, and that I think Wisconsin is really hungry for.
Talking about tech development, manufacturing, that sort of thing. A lot of talk about data centers, but to be perfectly honest, data centers don't produce the kind of exportable product technology manufacturing, hard manufacturing does. For a state to be successful, we need to be a net exporter of goods. Not internationally, but at least within the country.
Yeah.
How do you promote? How do you encourage development of manufacturing within the state?
And I totally agree. Wisconsin has always been a state that is exporting to the rest of the country and to the rest of the world, whether it was the fur trade or timber or lawnmowers, and now CAT scan and MRI machines. These are all the things that we produce in Wisconsin. And we have still 9,000 manufacturers all around the state who are precision manufacturers or who are making parts for other machines, or they're building, big, beautiful fire trucks in Oshkosh. Like, we continue to be an incredible manufacturing state. one of the reasons I really partnered with Microsoft on the Innovation Center in Milwaukee is because we need to continue to modernize our manufacturing. And I believe that AI and automation are things that our manufacturers need to pay attention to, need to think about how can I use that in my factory, in my building, in order to remain competitive and have productivity continue. It's, you know, it's a global marketplace, and Wisconsin needs to be a player in that marketplace. And so continuing to support investment in our businesses, continuing to support their ability to address future technology and bring it in and be in control of it rather than having it be a tidal wave over it, I think is incredibly important for the state. And you know, these manufacturers, I invite you to look around as you're driving. You'll see a shed on the side of the town that you drive through. You know, as you enter into a town, you see a couple businesses, and you start to realize that 25 or 50 people are employed there, and that's really the heart of manufacturing in Wisconsin. And we need to think about those businesses and make sure that we're supporting them because they're key parts of every community's economy. And if they close or they, you know, don't have a place to sell as they age out of owning their business and they want to retire, we need to be making sure that those businesses stay active and stay productive and keep employing people.
I'm reluctant to ask this question because I think it'll show my complete lack of knowledge. But earlier, going back to education, you had mentioned that that you wanted to separate, you wanted to fund public schools in the separate issue is the voucher system. Mm-hmm. I guess I don't understand how you can fully fund public schools without dismantling the voucher system.
Well, I appreciate that question. There are a number of families, particularly in Milwaukee and Racine, who have chosen the voucher schools and are sending their kids to voucher schools. So dismantling it, you know, signing a piece of paper on day one that says we're getting rid of the voucher schools will upend a lot of those families' choices and what they're doing. So my thinking is we keep our eye on the ball and our focus on fully funding public schools while putting accountability and performance measures on the voucher schools, which will slowly shrink them and be able to return those dollars to the public coffers and support all the things that we need to invest in, whether that's public schools, which of course we do, but then also our roads and things like that. So I don't want to continue to spend money on voucher schools, but I also don't want it to just have, my perception as a non-politician coming into this is like, that's a big fight over there. I don't want to have that fight. I want to have the make sure I win funding public schools fight. And so it's just a question of balancing, like, where do you put your energy? And you know, I think about it from business terms. You know, do you try to squash it, like actively try to squash a competitor, or you build up your business so that you become the winner? And that's what I want to do for public schools. Does that help?
Yeah, I know.
And I do agree that I think the knowledge for taxpayers to know how much they're paying for a St. Paul's or whatever is really powerful to wake people up and say, your choice, my neighbor, well, you can send your kids wherever you want to go, but I don't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
I think it could be powerful.
For sure, because, you know, and I think it's powerful statewide, because some people think it's only in Milwaukee or Racine that voucher schools are only receiving money there. And that's people outstate think that, and then also people in Milwaukee think, well, we're the only ones who have voucher schools. This doesn't affect the rest of the state. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh my man, come with me to the other communities that are really, you know, having to write checks to voucher schools, because this is a statewide issue. And so I think that transparency absolutely will help for people to understand. And you know, it is. I'm seeing so much support for solving this box that we have put ourselves in when it comes to how we're funding our schools. But I think that, that knowledge continues to need to be spread so that people understand that.
Housing affordability, and especially corporate purchases of private homing, disabling young families to be able to get an entry point into housing. I've heard, that the average age now of buying a first house is well into your 40s.
Yeah.
And it's not right. How do we address it?
Yeah, I think there's two main challenges that I've seen with houses being bought and taken off the market, both private equity, but also Airbnb and things like that. And I know, in my community, in communities around the state that I've talked with, they're really struggling because they're seeing, especially our North Woods and communities like Hayward or Ashland are seeing homes where teachers and firefighters traditionally would have lived are now empty for a good part of the year and used as Airbnbs. So I think, those are two places where we can start to address how houses are taken off of the market and not available, in the inventory. And I think we should ban private equity from buying homes in Wisconsin.
How do we do that in an open marketplace?
Well, you have to put in restrictions, and you have to have a trifecta to be able to do that. But that's a big step because you are impacting people's property rights, and you need to make sure that you do it well. I would say on the flip side, similar to childcare, we also need supply, and we need to make sure that we are building housing. And while that seems, very difficult, we are having success building housing around the state. I'm seeing housing built in Eau Claire and Kenosha. My hometown just built a multifamily apartment building, and then there are 200 homes being built up the street. Like we can make these things happen. We can put our mind to it, and supply is going to help make things more affordable and make that available to young families. I know here in the Sheboygan region, there was a really innovative project between businesses and the local community to help support the building of housing so that there's more opportunities for workforce to be living and working in this community. And I think those innovative ways of doing things are really, really smart, and they will work around the state. And we actually proposed legislation that would enable the state to support the same kind of model that happened here in Sheboygan to build housing here, Sheboygan County.
Let's bring it up. I mean, it needs to be there. Marijuana.
Let's bring it up.
We need to legalize marijuana, and I would legalize marijuana. What I would want to do is study and make sure we did it in accordance with the smartest state, or learn from other states that have done it, right? We're an island. What have all of the other states learned as they've legalized marijuana? And let's do it. Let's take those lessons and learn them well. Like Michigan, I think, is a bit of a mess right now with some of the licensing. Minnesota had an interesting model where they allowed the tribes to kind of get an 18-month jump on it and receive benefit there. I think there's all sorts of ways we could look at it. It should happen, but let's do it smart.
I have a question on that topic about, we're looking at strictly medicinal, correct? Because I lived in Nevada where they legalized it, and I swear everywhere you pulled up to a light or something, oh my God, you could get hyped with the car next to it. I mean, it's horrible. And that's where we're standing with that medicinal, not open-ended.
Yeah.
Correct?
I would say we need to look at recreational also. But I agree, there's nothing more than when I also drive up and have my windows open and then my car smells like a skunk.
Exactly.
It is frustrating, but nobody should really be using it while they're driving. And so, where are the places that we can put restrictions in and be as smart as we can? I also worry, I have some friends in Colorado where one of the first that legalized it, and the strength of the marijuana, I think, is scary for young people.
It's not like, I can say, 'cause my hair's white, it's not anything like it was in the sixties, okay? So, whatever it is they're putting in it while they're growing it is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
It smells like a skunk crawled in your backseat, but it's not, I mean, like in Las Vegas, if you went to the strip, no matter where you walk, they're selling it right there on the strip, outside the major casinos and stuff. I mean, it's just outrageous. And it's not being monitored to an age or anything like that.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can, and police cars pull right up beside it, you know, I know they're smelling it like I am. I've got to roll my windows up and you still get it. It's like, why are they not pulling them over? You know, that's like drinking and driving, you know, smoking, it's the same thing. We're drugging and driving now, you know, and so I hate to see that happen. We have enough issues here. If we start out with medicinal, not like people aren't going across the straight line and getting it now. We all know they are. So
Right. And I
we're
mean,
just not getting the tax kickback for that. So I get that part of it, you know?
yeah, and I think criminalizing it also is you can see how that has also overloaded our criminal justice
Oh,
system.
yeah. I agree with
So
that.
being cognizant of that.
But I think if somebody, you know, if you drive up, you know, and somebody's in your car, now that is a criminal act. You know what I'm saying? So, just depending, I'm just curious as how that would be regulated, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's why I say I'd like to understand who has done it well.
Right.
You know, we've fallen behind on that, so taking a hot minute and really thinking about who's done this well, how has it been well regulated, how do you make sure that you do get the tax revenue? If you're gonna make the step to legalize, I think those are all really important pieces to consider before doing it.
Good answer.
Would it be safe for me to say, like, people have to go back and talk to about you, would it be safe for me to say that the economy is like the tip of your spear? By that I mean, if we work on our school problem, it's gonna help the economy. If we work on other issues, it's gonna help the economy. So is that a safe thing for me to say?
I think what you just said describes it very well.
Okay.
Yeah, I just believe that it's always important to keep our eye on good paying jobs, on starting your own business, on the opportunities to, be able to prosper. There's foundational pieces that need to happen with that, the education system, the healthcare system, but we have to be able to help people be able to prosper, and the economy is the key piece of that. It ain't sexy, but that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, one last one.
Okay.
The first 2 years, you're gonna be facing a hostile federal government. As you come up, what can you do in the state to combat the overreach that's happening in the Trump administration?
Yeah, and I actually just put out a plan to stand up to Donald Trump because as a lawyer, I find what he's doing incredibly offensive. And I think that while we've done a great job of playing defense, and if something is done, we file a lawsuit against it, we try to fight it that way. I think there are places where we can go and say, your corruption is taking Wisconsin dollars and lining your own pockets. I think there are places where we can actively pursue getting those tariff dollars back for our small businesses. There's $166 billion that's getting $22 million of interest every day sitting somewhere. And those dollars deserve to come back to Wisconsin. And I also think we need to actively protect our elections and make sure that we're putting resources in place to have everything we need to protect our elections. And that is, within the state's rights, that is the state's authority, and that is all of our power. And I'll I'll be damned if he's gonna take that away from us.
I have a question on the drug situation.
I'm sorry.
I said I have a question on the drug situation
Okay.
or paraphernalia. My son just recently decided that he needed to buy storage units that are being auctioned, okay? Well, he came across in a couple, probably, I think so far 3 within our city here. Going in there and there's hypodermic needles, there was some crack cocaine there, some ammunition and stuff. And when he called the police department about it, they said just dispose it. And I'm like, that doesn't sound good, just throw it in the garbage. I told him to take it and put it in the thing inside the police department where you can take old medication. But he says, Mom, I don't feel comfortable doing that because they'll think I'm the one using it or dumping it. My thing is there should there be something, because the people that own these storage units, when they go to auction them, they have to go in there and look to see what's in there. Why are they not having to get rid of that stuff and dispose it? He said that ammunition, that some of them had markings on it, like, like we've seen in the news with murders and stuff like that. And to me, I said, honey, that's not something that I would just toss, because that could have been something that was in a murder in Milwaukee or something like that, evidence. And that was the answer he got. So just dispose of it on your own, and that just,
Yeah.
that leaves it open. If you put it in a dumpster for somebody to dig in there, find it, you know what I'm saying? It just, is there an answer to that where you feel safe to be able to, if you come across it,
To me, my reaction to that is to think about how overloaded our law enforcement is.
Right.
With dealing with mental health issues, with, having a shortage of officers and support staff, that somebody, couldn't even take the moment to understand, like, this is actually a potentially dangerous situation and we need to address it. And so I think, as we think about shared revenue, as we think about how we support our communities, we have to recognize that right now our law enforcement is put under incredible strain. And, a few months ago after I launched, I did a 8-hour shift driving around with one of our local law enforcement officers in Vernon County. And the strain and the stress, like, I could have slept for 3 days after that. And I was just sitting in the passenger seat, and, how incredibly difficult it is to just even get out of a car and approach another car. The officer explained to me that she just expects everybody has a gun.
Yeah.
And everybody has, that every situation that she's walking into is dangerous and challenging. And then, addressing mental health and all of that. So, I think that's my reaction to your question is, this is a resource problem, and how do we make sure that we have the resources?
Shouldn't the businesses be held accountable for them? They go in and take pictures of these, but they auction them online. Being that they're in there, they should be the ones that dispose of that and have a container to dispose it in, rather than it being open to anybody who goes in there and comes across it. That's where I'm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that seems
responsible for that. You know what I'm saying?
that seems fair. If you think about a property owner, usually is responsible for what's happening on their land. But how do we make that happen? I think it's not something I've thought about. I think it's really
Me
novel.
either, until he called me about it, and I thought, that's a little shaky that when he called the non-emergency number and they said, well, just dispose of it yourself. And I'm like, I wasn't comfortable with that, because that's shaky. And I said, I certainly hope when you go in there, you're wearing some kind of protective gloves, that kind of thing. But, his kids go in there with him to help him do some of that. And that's just, I think the business should have to be taking care of that somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a
And
fair
I'll have to look at
request.
it here in my community and find out more what I think.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure, if there is regulation on the storage units. I know,
That's
yeah.
something that maybe I'll look into, because it is something that is a big thing right now. People are left and right doing this because it's easy to make money by putting a picture up online, that kind of thing, hence why he's doing it. But what you come across in there, knowing these owners of these storage units have gone inside and knows what's in there, I think they should be responsible to have to rid it of that first before they auction it off, but.
Yep.
So, all right.
I don't disagree with your logic at all.
No, I'll get after it.
Missy, any final thoughts or any takeaways that you would like us to have from our time together with you this afternoon?
Oh, I just appreciate you all spending time with me today. This is just an incredible privilege to be able to travel around the state and talk with folks about what we're thinking about, challenges that I'm facing. I got to do it as Secretary of Economic Development for 6 years, and I'm so glad to be able to continue it, and I just hope that when I'm elected governor, I can spend more time on the road than in Madison, the same way I did for the 6 years, because I think it's incredibly important to be talking with folks and hearing what's on everybody's minds, and it's an incredible way to learn, so thank you so much for that. Again, my website is Missy for Governor, and if you would be interested in signing my nomination papers, it's not a vote, just gets you on the ballot and helps democracy continue. So thank you so much, I really, really